Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a very non-traditional color combo for a Halloween card. This is for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge, and it threw me for a loop. I didn't have to do it in a Halloween theme, but I thought I would experiment and see what happens. So I was watching Tim Holtz video on the Ranger Distress Halloween release. Go to his YouTube channel if you haven't watched it. It's like 2 hours long. Just there's tons of info, but also inspiration, you know, all the good stuff. And I was watching that while I was doing this, and I was like, I got my Brayer, I got some sprays. I'm going to experiment. So I'm working on white heavy stock here. This is Distress Heavy Stock. You know, it's super heavyweight, really white. It holds up to all the things. You could also use like Distress watercolor paper, regular watercolor paper, all the things. Work with what you've got, see what works. Experiment. I've said that like a million times. Experiment. It's fun. You could also do this with Distress Oxide inks. Distress inks as well, but I specifically went with Oxides because they layer a bit more. But I'm also kind of keeping it light, but then I go heavy-handed, so Anyway, I did a little bit of splattering first, and then I dried it. And then I'm doing the Brayer thing that Tim was doing in his video, and I was like, ooh, I like that like drippy sort of look it was creating. So all I did was like spray my Oxide spray onto my craft mat, and you lightly, like I'm not pressing, like you just super lightly, like a feather, just glide your Brayer through it, because if you press down, you're just gonna press the ink away from it. So I lightly went through the spray, and then I'm lightly rolling it back and forth on the background. And the colors I'm using are milled lavender, spun sugar, and brush sage. Again, never in a million years would I thought I'd make a Halloween card with these three colors. But that's why I love the Color Throwdown Challenge. It makes me think outside the box. I normally wouldn't even reach for these colors like together. I don't really do a whole lot of pastels, you know, but it was fun. So I did the first, you know, I'd done that little bit of spray in the beginning, dried it, did this like rolly, drippy effect with the milled lavender. Mostly dried it with my heat tool just to speed up the process. And then I'm just going to kind of keep repeating this with the other two colors. So the Brayer I'm using is the Tim Holtz Brayer. It is different than other Brayers I have. I bought this one and I bought the large one. This is the little baby one. They're different. I have barely used them. You know, I buy all these things and then they sit and I forget about them. Anyway, it is different though. Just whatever it's made out of, it has a different feel to it. And I also like the handle so I can hang it and it pops off like I showed. I just clean it when I'm using like distress products, water, my Costco baby wipes, like the Kirkland brand, because those are plant-based, which are awesome and they don't smell weird. Anyway, so I just kept doing that. So I did the milled lavender, I'm doing the spun sugar, and then I'll do the brush sage, because I wanted that, I love that like drippy look it creates. I could kind of do this with the sprays themselves, but it would be much more intense, like spraying along the top and letting them kind of drip down. But doing this with the Brayer was just fun. And again, experimenting. I honestly wasn't even sure if this would end up as a finished card. I was like, I'll just film this while I'm messing around and see what happens. So now I'm doing the bundled sage, and I was just spraying it on the little craft mat there. I'm like working on my little travel glass mat. I don't use this very much in videos because my lights reflect a lot, which is annoying, but it's also annoying for me when I'm filming because the lights will reflect and it's hard to like see what I'm doing, if that makes sense. So anywho, I like it though. If I could get my lighting situation figured out, you guys would see the glass media mat like in like all my videos. Anyway, so I did all that, dried it, and then I decided I wanted to lighten that up a bit because it was that bundled sage kind of took over. So I used my sprayer and just was spraying water at the very top of, well, what will be the top of this panel, and let it run down. And because they're Distress Oxides, they're reacting with water. I was picking it up. I'm just using my flour sack cloth. I've been showing that in recent videos. I've had this one forever. It's getting all stained. That's fine. These are great. I do have a link to them because Simon sells these as well. They're awesome. I have extras for backup when this one gets too saturated before I, you know, throw it in the wash. But yeah, so I did the drippy effect to lighten it, and it also made more drips. And then of course it's worked to high heaven. So I've shown this in videos as well. I'm going to run this through my little mini MINC machine. If you have a laminator with a heat setting, that'll work too. I just have it sandwiched between parchment paper and then just a heavyweight piece of cardstock. I'm going to run it through. It'll flatten it out. Another option would be to sandwich it between copy paper and run it through your die cut machine with just the plates, like no dies. That would work. Or if you have patience, stick it under a stack of books. You know, something heavy to flatten it. That works too. The MINC is just the fastest option. And it makes me use the darn thing. So that helps. I only worry when it's really warped because I want to stamp onto this. So I want to get it like as flat as possible. Otherwise I just, you know, because it's like, oh, I'll just, when I glue it down to my card, that'll flatten it. But again, depends on my mood and what I'm doing. So I did all that. And then I pulled out the Tim Holtz Hocus Pocus stencil that I bought last year, the year before. I don't know. I've been going through some of my Halloween stash and I've been finding a lot of things that I was like, oh my goodness, I forgot I bought this. Never got a chance to use it. So I'm using it on the background with my milled lavender oxide ink and just a blending brush. My ink pad's in one of those little, the ink stand from Brayer, and I'm loving them. Anyway, blended those inks on over the stencil. It's subtle. That's what I want. I don't want it like super obvious. But the stars are there and they're fun. And then that big image, this main like focus, this is the Colorado Craft Company Big and Bold Witch's Hat stamp set. Same thing. I bought this last year, the year before. I forget. I don't remember. Again, flipping through my container of Halloween stuff and I was like, oh yeah. This stamp is huge. When they say big and bold, they mean it. I did that flat shaker card the other day with their big ice cream cone image. If you missed that one, check it out. It's on my YouTube channel. I like these stamps. They're really big and they're fun. So anyway, trim down my background so it'll be slightly smaller than my card, which will be a 5x7 card. So I trim this down to like 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. And I want to stamp this hat on the background first. My original plan was actually to stamp the hat and then like on the background and color it directly on the background. All this. That's also why I made the background a little lighter with the water, because I didn't want too much color to interfere when I tried to color the hat, but I changed my mind. I'm still going to stamp this hat on the background though. So I lined up the panel on my MISTI, put this huge stamp, seriously, like this thing is like 6 inches wide, like it's big. Love it. So put the stamp on top of the background. I'm inking it up with my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink and stamping it onto this background. And it's basically just a placeholder for the most part. Nothing else. And also like all the funny little details, which I will get to in a bit. So after I did that, I cleaned off the stamp really well. And then I have some Nina Classic Crest 80-pound cardstock. Stuck that in my MISTI. And I'm inking up the stamp this time with Simon Says Stamps Intense Black ink. This is a Copic friendly ink. The Nocturne ink I used on the background is not Copic friendly. It will smear with Copics, hence the different inks. So I stamped that. I didn't stamp it perfectly because I don't worry about the squiggly bits on the bottom. That's irrelevant. I just wanted the hat, like the main image. And then I'm doing some super simple Copic coloring. Literally, super simple. This is one of those images that at first I was a little bit intimidated. I was like, oh, this might take me a while to color. But once I started, I was like, oh no, this is a pretty easy image to color. It's pretty basic. I like images like this because I've said this before, when they've got like a lot of line detail, things like that, they're like a purposely, I call it a messy image. It just takes the pressure off in a sense, you know, like there's already so much going on. So it just needs a bit of color. So I stuck with the colors of the color challenge. I did think about like coloring the hat, you know, black, the traditional, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it green. And I'm going to, you know, do green and pink and purple. Let's just go with it. So I colored the hat with the greens. And I used some purples for all these little like bands and whatnot. And the like little band around the base of the hat. So colored those with purples. And then this wing I'm actually going to color in pink. Because again, why not? You know, why not? So did that. I'm going to use a little bit of a dark gray for this little like belt buckle and little edges and whatnot. The spider I hemmed and hawed about. I've said this before in videos. I hate spiders in real life. Like, oh no, total phobia. Awful, awful, awful. But with this, I was like, do I want to color and then fussy cut this out? Like, no, not really. So I have a workaround for that as well. So I just left him on this image. So colored in the wing and then used like a lighter gray for these little like bones and whatnot that are hanging from this hat. Or actually I would use that on the background, obviously. So yeah, like I said, Nocturne ink is not Copic friendly. So I'm being very careful here. I'm not doing like a big blend, and I'm also coloring on top of Oxide inks, which you can color your Copic markers on top of like water-based, dye-based inks, all those things. Just the oxides, I'd be careful depending on what you're doing and how much you're doing, because the Copics could pick up and it could contaminate your markers. I was not concerned because I did such a little tiny bit. Like if I was doing like that whole image, I would not use my Copics for that. I wouldn't want to mess with them, you know. My Copics were a massive investment. So anyway, I did just that little bit of the spider with the Copic markers, just lightly, and then the little bones with the lighter gray, and that was it. And then I fussy cut the hat, but I left off all those little wiggly bits, the spider, everything. I was not in a million years going to cut any of that out. Ain't nobody got time for that. Plus, just no. This was simple. And because that's also why I stamped it on the 80-pound Nina cardstock, because it's thinner, so it's easier to cut. So I fussy cut it, and then I did my old tried and true. I've been doing this for 15 years, however long. I edged all the cut marks with my black tuxedo black marker. That'll make everything look more seamless, so that white edge will not show when I adhere this on top, so everything looks, you know, all fabulous. It's a little extra step that is totally worth it when you do fussy cut. I know most of us don't anymore, because no. I don't have time for it when my hands hurt when I do it, if I do it too much. This was okay. So I fussy cut that, and just that little vial, fussy cut those. But then I set it aside because after I did this, like, again, you guys, like, I was experimenting. I was all over the place. It was just like, you know, like the dog from Up. I was just like, squirrel, you know, something else popped in my head and I was like, ooh. So I backtracked here, went back to my background, and I was like, ooh, I want spiderwebs on this. So I pulled out the Tim Holtz spiderwebs stamp set that I used on those zombie cards that I posted in this series. So I pulled those out because I was like, ooh, those will go so nicely with this background and with this like drippy, messy hat, you know? Why not? So use my background in my MISTI again. Use some of these stamps. Because these are red rubber on cling foam, I remembered as I was like shutting the lid on my MISTI, I was like, oh, I need to take the foam out of my MISTI so I can stamp these. So I had to reposition everything. Like I said, I was flying by the seat of my pants. So having fun with it. Anyway, I'd use my anti-static powder tool very heavily on this because, again, there was like oxides and water and all the things. And also the hat was stamped in that Nocturne ink, which takes a while to dry. So did all this. I stamped these spiderwebs with clear embossing ink. And then I'm going to coat them with detail white embossing powder. Technically, I should have stamped them twice just to get like more even coverage, but in the end, honestly, it's not that big of a deal. Like this was like, you know, messy, sort of mixed media. I've mentioned this before, I'm not big on the mixed media, like me personally creating it. I love the look of it. I love watching people make mixed media. It's just, it's something I struggle with, but I have fun when I'm doing it. So this was kind of mixed media, I guess. Anyway, used a brush to brush off the embossed powder that was clinging to some of the portions of the hat. And then I melted it with my heat tool. Again, it's subtle. You know, these webs are such fine stamps, so it's hard to show in video and even the pictures, but in real life you can see them. And like the shine from the embossing powder picks up too. So it's just a fun little extra, you know? So melted those with my heat tool. And then once I had the spider webs completely melted and my workspace kind of cleaned up, now I can adhere the hat over this. So I'm using my craft tacky glue. This is the one that I have the little fine metal tip on so I can get into the little nooks and crannies, which with an image like this, I wanted to make sure I get the whole thing completely adhered down so that it covers up that background, like what it was stamped on top of, etc. So but also not applying like globs of glue. You don't want glue oozing out everywhere, and it doesn't take much. So once you adhere the hat into place, it's like, that's when everything starts coming together and it's like, okay, you know, yes, this works. So adhere that into place, and then I'll adhere that little vial. I purposely had the top of the hat there peeking out over this panel. Like I said, this is a huge stamp. Like this panel is nearly 5 by 7, just to give you an idea how big the stamp is. So got those adhered into place. And then my card sentiment first. I just took a bit of that remaining Nina cardstock, and I'm just going to white heat emboss one of the sentiments from the set onto it. Once that's heat embossed, I'm going to use that same milled lavender Distress Oxide ink and the blending brush, and I'm going to blend that right over the sentiment. And because it's heat embossed, it will resist that ink. So then I'll have the same color for the sentiment as the rest of the card front. So I just blended that on pretty heavily. And then I'll just use that flour sack towel to wipe off any of the ink sitting on top of the heat embossing. And then I can trim this down with my paper trimmer. And then I'm actually going to use some of the scraps from this cardstock and just adhere it behind the sentiment to pop it up a bit rather than use foam tape, because literally the scraps are sitting right there. Why not? So I'm going to adhere a couple layers of the scraps together behind that sentiment just to give it that little extra bit of dimension, and then adhere that to the card front. Once I got that adhered, I can then make my card base. And like I said, it's going to be a 5 by 7 card. So I've got Simon's heavyweight white cardstock, and I'm going to cut this to 7 inches by 10 inches. So that way I can score it at 5 inches and make my 5 by 7 card, which I don't do very often. I get asked a lot to do more 5 by 7 cards, and I'll do them every once in a while, but my, wheelhouse is A2 slimline, mini slimline. But there is something about 5 by 7 cards, and you do have a lot more space. And with stamps that are this big, yeah, that's what you got to do. So, made my card base, and then I'm putting it in my MISTI. Normally, I would just fold the card inside out so it would fit properly. This time, I'm zhuzhing it a little bit and making it work, because not only do I want to stamp this hat on the inside, I don't want to cut off that top portion. I don't know why. I was just kind of fixated on it. So I'm going to let it stamp past the fold. Again, I don't know. Whatever floats your boat. Like, I could have folded it inside out, turned it sideways. It would have fit better in the MISTI, all the things. But I was just like, it was like the top of the hat needs to be there. So anywho, stamped the hat with that milled lavender Distress Oxide ink. And again, I'm really glad for this color combo, because I wouldn't have reached for these colors. And milled lavender is not a color I reach for very often, but it is a gorgeous color. I was really enjoying it, obviously, because I was using it for everything. So stamped the hat, and then I took a couple more sentiments from the set and stamped them with the Nocturne ink. And then I could have done this way earlier, but again, I was kind of dithering. I was like, do I want to do this? Do I not? Black splatter. My go-to black splatter is Black Soot Distress Paint. I have not found any other product that is similar to this. It is so black, and it's a good liquid consistency, so it's like the perfect splatter. Plus, when it dries, it's permanent, which is also, you need to wash out your brush, wash off whatever you're working with immediately, because it is permanent when it dries. Especially the black soot, it just, oof. So, splattered that all over the background. Kind of kept it more concentrated to the edges and whatnot. Had it in my splat box there. And then I let that completely dry, washed off my tools, etc. Made sure that splatter was dry so I don't smear it everywhere, because I've done that too. And yeah, used my bone folder to remove. I did have a groove in the card front from having it weird in my MISTI like that, but I just used my bone folder to press it out and it was good to go. So I adhered my card front to my card base. And then of course I have to add more bling. I added my go-to favorites, my Studio Caudia iridescent stars that I've used in tons and tons of videos. I need to order more of these because I love them. They're so beautiful and they go with everything. So adhered some of those and some Trinity Stamps Pearly Pink baubles. And then as a last little form of embellishment, I remembered that I have my Aqua Shimmer pens, which I've used in tons of videos, but it's been a while, so I kind of forgot about them, like always. This stuff's fabulous, right? It looks like nothing, It depends how the light hits it. And on video, it literally looks like nothing. But I will use my flashlight on my phone and show you guys just how utterly fabulous this is. And now that I've pulled it out again, it'll probably make an appearance in several more videos coming up because it's gorgeous. So I painted the wings with it, the spider, the little swoopy bits and everything hanging from the hat. Because again, it looks like nothing, you know, it doesn't seem to take away from anything. This is also why I'm glad I used the Distress paint as the splatter, because it didn't smear with the aqua shimmer. So you can kind of see it, but wait till I bring the flashlight and then you can see how absolutely sparkly and fabulous. Like, oh, even that dratted spider, it's sparkly. So he's fabulous too, so whatever. And he's fake, so anyway. But yeah, even the little swoopy bits, I was glad I painted those with it, because like that bling just, yes. This was fun. Well, like all cards, this was a lot of fun to make. Very much out of my wheelhouse, all kinds of randomness going on, and a color combo I never, ever, ever would have thought to do for a Halloween card, let alone just a card in general. Not colors I would reach for. And yet I really enjoyed this. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll link to all the supplies used. I'll link to the color throwdown challenge on my blog post. So you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!